mean, it's just like, it's a great fucking world we live in now.
I know.
The walls are gone.
Yeah, the walls are gone, and there's really no excuse. It's like Adam Rifkin was saying. There's like no excuse to not make a film.
Yep, totally.
It just isn't.
The democratization of the tools, like every level of it now is so flat. It's fantastic.
Yeah. Well,
Sure.
Well, what's my excuse? I don't know. I've made some movies, but I haven't directed. But that's a whole other. Well, you know what? You transitioned from that. So let's talk about that. Okay, wait. Are we good?
Yeah, we're rolling.
Okay, we're rolling. Okay,
we're just jumping right in.
Like, share, subscribe. Let's talk about Unfriended.
The whole movie's about don't share, don't subscribe, run for the hills.
Before we bring on our guest, Steven Susko, I'm joined as always by my co-host.
Ray Bench.
And this is the Films Rep Podcast. I am Chris Gore, sometimes known as That Chris Gore. This weekend, we're going to be at San Diego Comic-Con. On Thursday, I'm doing a panel called Future Looks at Indie Films You Must See. And that's in room 5AB. I'm going to be presenting footage from indie movies that should be on your radar. That's 7 p.m. Thursday, July 19th. On Friday, July 20th, an epic battle. The last Jedi debate at 2 p.m. I know, exactly. 2 p.m. in the Neil Morgan Auditorium, which is at the San Diego Central Library, which is far, far away from San Diego Comic-Con, ironically enough. So please come to those events. If you don't get to attend the Last Jedi debate, we will be running that as a podcast the week after San Diego Comic-Con. But since this is just before San Diego Comic-Con, and also just before your film, Steven Susko, opens in theaters, I want to welcome to the podcast writer-director Steven Susko.
Hello. Nice to be here. I have to ask you, though, who were the contenders in this last debate?
Okay, so...
Who's the pro and who's the con?
Con, anti-TLJ, as we're calling it, is J.C. Reifenberg. I think it's J.C. and the Knights of Reifenberg. I think that's what it's going to be. And so and then it's also, I'll tell you who's on the pro TLJ is, I'm the moderator, so I'm not taking sides.
Totally neutral, right?
Right, yes, totally neutral. Yep, that's me. It's Charles de Lazarica, Cliff Stevenson. It's a friend of mine named Annie Cruz, Nicole Zilovich, Dante James, Anthony Ray Bench on Pro TLJ.
Fuck yeah, I love that movie.
Wait, it's like 7 or 8 against 1?
Well, yes, it's kind of like JC is like when I mentioned this to JC. Oh, and I should say we're actually outside. Normally we're inside, but it's an outdoor day here at the ArcLight Cinemas in Hollywood. We're actually outside the ArcLight Cinemas in Hollywood, standing in the shade. Well, basking in the shade for the moment.
Sitting.
I'm sitting. We're not. Yeah, we're in the shade for the moment. But if you hear any odd noises, it's because we're out in public. Because my whole thing on podcasts is I don't like these generic podcasts where you're in a studio and it's sort of this gentrified environment. Here's your Diet Coke or your water. It's like, no, I want to do it. I want to make it real. We're having a real conversation, whether it's in a bar, a restaurant, at one of my favorite movie theaters, wherever it is. And your film opens here this Friday, July 20th.
I think so.
Steven, so.
Yeah, buy your tickets at ArcLight. Get the awesome popcorn.
So there's so much to talk about with your film. But before we actually talk about Unfriended Dark Web, I want to talk about the pathway to getting to this, because this is the first time you've directed. Previously, you've been credited screenwriter on Grudge 2, mostly in the realm of horror. Previous to that, you were making films. I mean, that's how I met, and most of the people in the indie film world, I have to ask them to remind me how we met, because I don't remember. But how did we meet?
We met through just a bunch of horror people.
Was it just horror people?
It was right around the time that Grudge was. It was Paul Salamoff.
That's who it was. Yeah.
Garrick Dion, Justin Giacomot, Alex Daltis. The whole crew.
That crowd. Okay, that's how.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, one of those like gatherings.
Yeah.
Like maybe was there a birthday party for kids at one time?
I think it was. Yeah.
Yes.
And then you had one at your house. I remember this was like a decade ago.
Oh my God. Yeah, it was.
Plus.
But now you went away.
I went away.
You went away from. You didn't went away. You went away. You don't live in LA now.
I do not.
You're in the.
I was on the East Coast for a while. Now I'm in the Pacific Northwest.
Right.
So it's a little shadier than it is here right now.
Right.
A little damper.
Right. But
lucky.
Did that afford you some? Because I know some filmmakers that don't live in Los Angeles that philosophically are against it from the standpoint of. They actually think it works in their favor because when they're in town, well, they're in town for a limited window.
Right.
They could meet with anyone who's got a meeting slate. You can meet with those guys anytime. They live in Los Angeles. Because you come into town, they kind of have to take the meeting.
Yeah, it seems more motivation to get stuff done.
Right.
Yeah, no, certainly. I mean, the time that I spend here now is definitely much more sort of intense, and stuff does get done better, and and then I get to go home and be with my kids, and I don't know. I mean, most of what I do is still writing, so it's nice to kind of have that headspace. I like having a little bit of distance after. I mean, I was here for like 17 years, so I kind of
had enough.
Started here. Yeah, I wanted to change. I wanted something different, so I tried the East Coast for a while. I'm from where M. Night shoots all of his movies. That's my hometown. I basically grew up in Signs. That was the town next door. Yeah. And I was born in Witness. I was born in Lancaster. But it was really far from LA. It was a little bit harder. That's a much longer flight, and but yeah, Seattle works really well. I can fly in the morning and fly back at night, and it's all good.
Now, the great thing I remember about you is just you're always sort of rampant positivity and supportiveness for everyone in the horror film community. And
what's your secret?
Yeah, what's your secret? Yeah, how do you stay positive?
How can you not love the horror community?
Well, the horror community is the most supportive because even the worst of the horror films, they've got fans and supporters.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, horror. I mean, it's an incredibly dynamic genre. And it's reliant on change, so it's always churning, and it's always. I mean, I think the thing I love about it the most is that it seems like it's the genre that's most designed to find voices outside of the system. So it's the most vulnerable for access, which is great. It's just constantly refreshed by new voices, and I think that what ends up happening is that the people who operate in horror kind of bring that sensibility with them. And most people I know that are working in horror, that love horror, are always like finding people who are trying to get in and saying, "Come on in here. Let me hold the door for you." I think like the James Wan does that. Atomic Monster. Jason Blum has been doing that for years. Like it's just it just seems to be very genre specific, and I love it.
And I would also say most in tune with the zeitgeist.
Yeah.
Because the pathway to an idea is sort of in the air, which I've been reading that David Lynch book, Catching the Big Fish.
Oh, I haven't
about
read it
ideas.
yet.
It's so great.
Yeah.
It's so great. But it's the ideas are sort of in the zeitgeist, in the air, and I think horror is kind of the first genre that gets to, and then maybe documentaries later, but like something is out there, an idea, and it's processed through the horror meat grinder into talking about something that's happening now.
Yeah.
And I know with The Grudge, The Grudge, different in the sense that it was, based on the Japanese horror, right?
Which was popular at the time, very popular.
Very popular. And then you did the Americanized version. What was the pathway? It must have been one of those things where it's like lots of meetings.
The Grudge?
Yeah, to get to
lots of awful meetings.
Yes, lots of awful meetings.
Yeah. I mean, the origin was with Roy Lee. I had a general meeting with Roy, and we just hit it off. Like I walked into his office and he had the Stephen King, first editions chronologically arranged by publication date, which I had in my house.
That's awesome.
And yeah, it was like right away we were on the same page, and I said, I heard you're doing the remake of Ringo. And he's like, you've seen Ringo? I'm like, yeah, I love Asian horror. And so, so we just had a lot of common ground. And then he had gotten the Ju-on tapes of the original Ju-on TV show from like 2 days before. And he's like, oh, dude, you have to see scenes from this thing. And he showed me scenes in his office in the middle of the day that just freaked me the hell out. And I took him home and watched it. And there were no subtitles. Like it didn't, and those are already really disorienting stories. I'm sure you've seen the originals. Mm-hmm. And so we just teamed up on it from the beginning. But I mean, we pitched it around, and everyone was like, "What the fuck is this?"
It's that weird. Like,
it was before Ring had come out, so
right.
People weren't familiar with it yet.
Right, but it's like, and this is especially true of the horror community. I mean, this is sort of harkening back to a time that has passed us, but I remember making so many VHS tapes for other people, copy to copy, right? Mm-hmm. Peer to peer. You're just like, oh, dude, you have to see this.
Yep.
You have to see Guinea Pig or whatever it is. Like there are those, like it's almost like a dare when you hand someone that tape, right? Like,
yeah.
I mean, I'm sure that's where that idea came from, right? Of watch the tape and you'll die.
It must have been, because I think that was where the cross collateralization really started. It was like John Woo trying to watch a John Woo movie before they had theatrical distribution. It was all on a tape.
Oh, God, I remember ordering. Sorry, no, I just remember ordering like tapes from some weird companies in Florida that had these like, we'll send us a self-addressed stamped envelope to get our list, which was this tiny thing. This is before like you could order things from websites, right? But that's a lot of how horror fans survived.
Yeah, I mean, you guys traded tapes. My generation, like, I was always drawn to foreign horror films, and I remember before your remake came out, like, I downloaded the original Grudge on Kazaa.
Oh yeah, Kazaa, that's right. Yeah.
Wow.
I remember the weekend the movie came out and going online and being like, I wonder if it is people are downloading it right now. Like the Friday night that it opened, it was crazy.
But I never did that with like American movies that I could get my hands on. Like back then, like getting your hands on like foreign films was just very, very difficult. But yeah, like I'm not a pirate, I swear.
No, I was a product of the video store too, and I mean, we kind of, I think we're similar age.
I worked at a video store.
And that whole, the glory of the VHS horror, like that window of time where just horror exploded on video because people could make movies without the pressure of trying to get into theaters.
Right.
And how great that was to kind of seed people, and find this whole new, generation of horror fans. But yeah, even then it was still hard to find horror from other countries. It was hard to find films from other countries back then too. So, but yeah, I mean, it was really The Ring coming out. Like we would, every room we pitched The Grudge to, people were just like, I don't get it. Wait, the ghost wins. It's not told in chronological order. What the hell is this? I mean, it was just awful. We were getting crushed in the room. And Roy said, we're testing The Ring, and it's testing through the roof. So why don't we wait for 3 months until October? Let's wait for The Ring to come out and see what happens. And The Ring was the reason The Grudge got made. I mean, it was plain and simple. There were two main reasons. The first was The Ring, because The Ring actually made more in its second weekend than its first weekend. Which is
that never happens now. It never happens now.
Totally unheard of. I don't even know if how often it happened back then. It was incredible. But of course, then right away, everybody we pitched to that was like, get the fuck out of here. I'm sorry, I'm allowed to curse or not.
Yeah,
you can say fuck on the Film Threat podcast.
Right, good, thank God. I know the Film Threat hasn't changed.
Nope.
But everyone that kind of didn't get it wanted to hear it again. Everybody that didn't want to hear it wanted to hear it, and the other factor that really got it made was Sam Raimi, because Sam had just teamed up with Senator International, which was a German finance company, to create Ghost House Pictures, and they were looking for their first movie. And Takashi Shimizu. So basically, the plan from the onset was, we're going to develop an American film, and he was going to direct a feature in Japan. And it was like, let's not share stories. So then we'll just see what happens. And he was like, great. So 3 months later, he just sends us a print of his movie. He's like, I'm done. How are you guys? Can I see yours? And we're like, what? In Japan, they just make them. There's no delay. It's like, let's make a movie. Okay. And then 2 weeks later, is there a first cut yet?
Oh my God.
And so Shimizu-san had sent us the Grudge, the first feature, Ju-on the feature. So the first person we showed that to was Sam Raimi, Rob Tappert, and he was like, and he was the one who also said, let's have Shimizu direct this, and let's do it in Japan. That was sourced straight from Sam Raimi. And then Sam also really protected the movie during, especially post-production, when the studio kind of had impulses to make it a little bit more easily digestible. Sam was the guy who kept the movie what it really should be. So thank God.
And getting from there then to you did a couple things between, right?
I was going to direct a movie for Universal, but
right.
it didn't happen.
But there were a lot of meetings.
There were not that one, not the Universal one, but I mean, directing was always sort of you were on
that pathway.
Yeah, I mean, the Grudge did really well, so that automatically sort of changed the tenor of conversations. Mm-hmm. But I was a little paranoid about directing because. It's with horror, I think it's important to put something out there that's singular, and I didn't want to direct something that was just an easy remake, or so a couple things came across. I think at one point it was Terror Train was a possibility. It was I don't know, maybe I was being arrogant, but I wanted to do something that I really, really saw, and as a horror fan, I wanted to see. I think that was important too. That's all. My barometer for a project is do I want to see this?
Right, right.
And then I'll write it, or I'll try to direct it. So there was a novella that I had read by this author named Tim Levin, his Welsh writer. We're really good friends now. He's an amazing writer, but he wrote this novella called White that I optioned from him and was trying to figure out. And around the same time, a guy that I'd done a lot of work for over the years at Dimension, through the writing thing, he had set up a label called Rogue. And his whole thing was to take writers that he had worked with and give them their first directing opportunity and create kind of unique genre films. And the first one was The Strangers with Brian Bertino. And so he said, "Do you have anything?" And I said, "Oh yeah, I have this thing called White." And I pitched it to him, and he was like, "Okay, do it. Let's write it." So it was an amazing like one meeting sort of deal. But Rogue only sort of lasted through that first movie. Although no, they did Neil Marshall's first American film too, which was called,
I don't know.
It was a John Carpenter mashup. You know what I'm talking about? It was the one about Scotland gets divided because a plague devastates half of it, and it was like half Escape from New York, half Mad Max, and then 0.01% something
Someone's
else.
listening to the podcast going
God,
like, those idiots.
It was a kind of
They're
an
not
awesome
real
movie.
film fans.
Exactly. We're sitting in the sun. It's hot. Brains don't work so well.
But now, so I'm want to rush to talk about, because I have so many things to discuss.
Oh,
with
you
Unfriended.
saw the movie, right?
Of course,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, we both did.
Oh, yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah, and along with a colleague of ours, Dante James, who may join us later.
Right on.
He may join it because we talked about that movie for hours after.
Did you really?
Yeah, we loved it.
Oh, that's awesome. Wow.
Well, first of all, it's
That's
always
great to hear.
It's always great when we have someone on the podcast whose movie we actually really loved.
That's true.
That's
Yeah.
number one.
Man,
But
I'm especially grateful for that, because otherwise I'd be like, okay, so nice talking to you.
Well,
guys.
And
people-
the funny thing is, like, we were all kind of dreading it just based on the first film. Which
I
didn't
wasn't
care
dreading
for.
it because I know Steven.
Well.
You may have been, not me. But anyway, so
But yeah, it blew us away.
Oh, man,
It
that's
really
so
did.
great to hear.
And
Thank
the
you.
audience too, the audience of quote critics, right? Who are that we're sitting in
Usually
like
stuffy and kind of
freaked out
Really?
during certain moments. Oh yeah, yeah. I
nice.
wish they could have recorded the audio just so you could hear other people watch the movie, because this is the one thing that I loved. I mean, one of the things I loved about it was the authenticity, in the sense that yes, this is so people kind of talk to each other online. These are the crazy fun things they do. I like the device of the guy in the relationship with the deaf girl trying to sign. I thought that was well played, and the fact that it plays out in real time and that the screens were authentic. I mean, there were a couple
yeah.
made up things, but they seemed authentic in that like there are people are talking about Facebook and Skype and do this, or give me access to your computer through X, like it was completely, and then Bitcoin is part of it. I don't want to. I think we'll get into spoiler territory. It's going to be hard for me to hold back like later in the conversation, but we'll give a warning. But I love the fact that it played out in real time. Love the fact that we get to know. The first 10 minutes is just getting to know people, and it's fun. You would think like it's all on screens, like, oh, this is going to be it works so perfectly, and I'm curious if
thanks, dude.
like they've had if you've seen it with audiences, because I know they do testing, what they call focus testing, focus testing, but like you must have seen it with authentic horror fans, because that doesn't describe the hey, what's happening? This always happens.
It's a Chris Gore fan.
We're doing a podcast, Tori.
I heard you're famous, bro.
That's right, somewhat. Not really.
Podcast at the ArcLight in Hollywood.
Yeah, that's what's happening. They can't hear you.
Good.
Okay.
Am I seeing you on the
This happens to Chris Gore all the time.
Yeah, I'll see you at Comic Con.
He can't
I'll
even.
see you at Comic Con. Love you, man.
He can't even
All right,
walk down
later.
the street
No,
without like
it's-
someone
leave it-
stopping him.
Leave it,
and,
leave it
you
and
know.
don't. See, this is why I like doing this kind of stuff.
totally.
It feels real,
Yeah.
just like your film feels real in the sense that all the stuff. No, but I mean,
Nice segue.
it does. And like, okay, so I want to.
Well, that was my biggest
get-
paranoia about it, because I mean, it was a movie that had to play authentically, or else it just wouldn't work.
Well,
you know?
in real time.
Yeah.
I mean, it takes place in about 90 minutes ish, right? So,
Yeah.
so it and everything feels. I mean, I want to get into like how you were able to pull it off, because there are places where it's like, okay, obvious cut here, or yeah, there's a cut here, but there is shit. Now, what I also love is the process is revealed of how certain things happen to certain people. See, I'm being coy. I shouldn't. I want to stay coy for a little bit, but at least, okay, when you got the gig or you had to pitch your take, right, for Unfriended, because this is the sequel, right?
Sort of.
Sort of the
It's
first
like a
one-
non-sequel.
It's a non-sequel.
Yeah,
the
it's-
first one had a spiritual element, and you were telling me about it. I never saw it. And
You never saw the original?
I never saw the original.
Oh man, you should go home and watch it. Like, now that you've seen, I mean, it's similar and completely different at the same time, and it's so subversive. It's so subversive.
Well,
It's,
did your film start out as a sequel to
no,
Unfriended?
it was never a sequel. No, basically the origin of it was I got a call from. I mean, I've never worked for Blumhouse, but I've known Jason and I've known Cooper Samuelson and obviously Ryan Turek for a long time. And they just they called and they said, "Hey, have you seen our film Unfriended?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, I saw it in theaters twice." I'd never seen anything like that. It was unbelievable to go see a movie like that takes place on a computer screen. I mean, they basically invented a new genre with that movie. It's not found footage.
It's not found footage.
It's not at all. You are the protagonist. You are in their headspace. I mean, I could go on forever about that first movie, but so I did on the phone. I was like, "Oh, dude, yeah." And it's like, "Oh, that's great that you really like it. Hey, what would you think doing a sequel?" And I was like, "Oh shit." I mean, I at first I was really kind of against it because it is such a, we were talking about singular horror, and Unfriended created a brand new thing. And the idea of doing a sequel to a brand new thing is like, it's not that it's not fun, but as a, being cautious about what my first film was going to be, I didn't want to just do like a pale shadow of something that worked really, really well, and made a kind of a dent. So I said, I don't know for those reasons. And they were like, well, why don't you just think about it and tell us what you would do? Like, just say there's no rules. What would you do? So I basically pitched them like, what if the franchise is the format? So I follow the same parameters, the same limitations, because that's fun. I mean, you don't often. I've been doing it for, I've been writing for a while, but this was an opportunity to write something that I've never even tried, something in real time with those crazy limitations, right? So I said, what if I just did. If I did it all on screen, all in real time, same sort of thing, but everything else I did the exact opposite. Like I want to run away from the original as much as possible. So PG-13 instead of R, all the violence off camera, characters that are 10 years older and have lives instead of high school kids.
I didn't realize it was PG-13.
Well, it's not.
It's not? Okay,
no,
at
it
the
isn't.
beginning you were thinking PG-13.
Yeah, I really wanted it to be PG-13. It's R, yeah. Well, there's a story behind that too. But no, I always wanted it to be PG-13, and I thought that even if it was intense, if everything sort of happened off camera, and I also like the idea that instead of it being kind of about the deaths that you kind of like cheered after, that it was sort of the opposite, and that you didn't want bad things to befall, and that it was more like, instead of it being kind of an up and down roller coaster, it was just this slow inevitable climb and then like a sudden plunge. I just kind of wanted to try to invert everything that movie did. Not a ghost, completely real world based. So basically, like, that was my first impulse, was run away from the original because it's just too singular. I don't want to try to follow that up. And then the other ideas sort of came from a movie that I developed over the past couple of years that I think we might get filmed this fall, that I co-wrote with a former CIA agent. It's based on one of his cases, and I spent a lot of time with him, but also other people in the intelligence services. And I'm a technophile, but I started to become a technophobe after kind of finding out a lot of things about the surveillance state and all the things that are going on with our phones. And
it made me paranoid seeing the film because of how much. I mean, there's a lot of people that put the little piece of tape over the camera.
Yeah,
it's on now. You if you don't do that, you're an idiot.
Well, it was the most rewarding experience because people were skeptical about the script. I constantly had people being like, "Is this bullshit?" Like all this stuff, and it was really rewarding. Where I think it was like while we were filming, the director of the FBI finally had that moment on camera where he said, "Oh yeah, we all cover our cameras. Like we know that there's vulnerabilities." And the next day, seeing people on set with tape over their cameras was so nice because I think all skepticism finally went out the window. I mean, one of the parameters that we said from the beginning was nothing should happen in the movie that hasn't happened to people in the real world. Mm-hmm. Like let's make this as authentic as possible. If we're gonna, I pitched it as like Jaws on the internet, essentially, just in terms of a concept. But I wanted it to be.
Wow. That's such a great. Yeah,
well, it's an easy way to like wrap your head around it.
Right. It's like, oh yeah, like it's coming.
Well, people always use the ocean as the metaphor for what the internet is, what the deep web is, and what the dark web is.
Right.
I mean, the ocean is the best metaphor. The social media where we swim is like right on the surface, and then there's this. I'm gonna totally fuck it up, but I think it's called the bathyphasic zone, mesopelagic zone is the zone from the surface of the ocean to where light can no longer penetrate the water. And that's basically the surface internet. So most of the ocean is dark. Most of the ocean is where light can't penetrate. The bathypelagic zone, I think it's called.
That's where the Meg comes from.
That's where the
opening in theaters. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that is. Oh no, I think it comes from Megalodon.
Right.
But Megalodons, I think, were down there. But But that's like the deep web. The deep web is just the bulk of the internet, and it's filled with a bunch of crap. Like, it's filled with stuff that Google just can't, search engines can't crawl deep enough. They can't see that far in.
Right.
And then the dark web is just an extrapolation of human history, of like, you know, people who find the shady corner of the park, right, to do something that's illicit. The dark web is the same thing. It's just, you know, people go, oh, there's this whole space where Google can't reach and people don't know, and so why don't we just build a layer of encryption around things and then just do stuff down there in the dark? And that's the dark web. It's not that mystical. It's actually pretty, you can wrap your head around it. But it seemed like an easy pitch then to sort of talk about it as an ocean. You know?
Now, you did your own research to kind of plot out what was possible. I mean, how much of that changed in the writing process in terms of, like, I mean, there really is a strict timeline, and it does start out kind of like this is a fun hangout on a Friday night with friends on the internet. Which
playing Cards Against Humanity,
which people do.
It was originally Settlers of Catan, by the way.
Yeah,
that's hilarious.
That's great, but it's
that's amazing.
But I love that because it's so relatable. It's like, oh yes, I've had also these Friday or Saturday nights, just hanging out. Like, let's just hang out, and then things go south quick.
Well, one of the things that I learned quickly about the I mean, it's such a unique narrative form that we're all so comfortable using computers that you do really subtle things to let the audience get clued in on things that even the main character wasn't aware of, you know, like how many beach balls of death you start to realize, like, maybe something's off with this computer, how many little stutters, just little tiny cues that can send a huge signal to the audience without necessarily sending up a flare to someone who's using a computer and it just acts funny for a moment.
I actually don't even think you need to know all that much. If you understand that it's like, this is how people talk on Facebook. If you've used Facebook, this is, you're going to get everything that's in this film, because everything else, I mean, I'm sure, if I recall correctly, there are some things that are made up. There are types of software that are made up, right? Like the one he uses. Yeah, there's some, but also
DaisyDisk is real. I mean, most of it is pretty real. Yeah,
most of it is pretty real.
There's a few really tiny things.
Did you have to get the rights from those companies or get some sort of clearances, or is it?
I can't. That's up to that's
a legal.
Yeah,
that's a legal thing.
That's above my pay grade.
Right. Oh, even better.
I know that we had to change. So because I used a Jaws reference, there was a Jaws reference in the movie. So there's that beat where AJ has gone off on his tear, and then they hold up the camera and they showed him the shark video. Originally, they all started going, I can't do it because I don't want you to get sued. They started doing the Jaws score. So up until like 3 days before the movie had to be locked, we had them doing the Jaws cue. And suddenly realized that nobody had talked to Universal about using the Jaws cue.
But it's Universal putting it out, right? I mean,
yeah, but it's also Amblin and John Williams and Steven Spielberg. There's a long chain of people who one of them said no. Not in this movie.
Spielberg's been notoriously like not cool with people using the Jaws theme, right?
I think
He's particular.
Like, at the same time, I get it because this movie's it's a dark movie, you know, and that's one of the most famous cues in cinematic history, and you know, so I get it. We just had to make that change very, very quick.
So how did you, in terms of plotting this out, did you even have to like? I feel like this is something where in the plotting out of this script, you needed lots of yarn and whiteboards to connect certain things, because it really is, it's complex in its simplicity. Does that like, because everything is so well plotted. And there's also, I can't tell you how many times, because we were all sitting next to each other in the theater, we just turned to each other and went, like, just making faces like, oh, did you see that? Holy shit, did you see what just happened? Oh, they did it. They went there. Holy shit.
That's awesome.
Like, yeah, there were those moments, and I could see that other people in the theater were having those kinds of what the fuck moments. So that was all well plotted and all well, I mean, a
fair amount of it, yeah. I mean, I think it's like that famous Ray Bradbury quote, you know, like, as human beings, you have to throw yourself off the cliff and develop wings on the way down. You know, like the I had never told a story like this before, so, and we had to do it very quickly. I mean, I had 2 weeks to write the first draft. Like, it was lightning fast. So a lot of it was just the people that I worked with, you know, having actors who we had more days we had 5 days of rehearsal and 4 days to film all the dialogue. Initially,
wait a sec. So you shot this movie in how many days?
Well, the first photography was 8 days, and it was 4 days for the dialogue and 4 days for everything else. like building the green screen set to do the thing that happens in the subway. And
Oh yeah, right. There's specific other things that happen from cameras.
Yeah, we had to move
and
the
those
we had to
are
move
other
around.
yeah. But the actual just straight talking through it, because you could almost do it as like a film. You could do Unfriended the stage play.
Well, you know, that's the approach that we took, and that's I got actors that had a lot of theater experience, a lot of improv experience, and they were amazing. I mean, you could tell like the movie was going to live or die based on their performances, and some of them got the script 2 days before our first day of rehearsal. They filmed 47 and a half pages of dialogue on day one.
Jesus.
I mean, I was really blessed to work with these people, but I think it was unique for them too. So I think they brought in this energy. Like, you know, I think it took a couple days for them to realize that I meant it when I said, I need you to help me make this better. We need to find characterizations that give a sense of a real backstory between these characters that we're not going to have time to really get into in the movie. And it has to just feel instant, a lot of this.
It felt so real from the beginning. Like all these characters are like people from our own lives.
Yeah,
right?
that's good to hear.
Yeah, and especially touching the relationship with your lead and the girl who's deaf, and he's trying to create this software just so he can better communicate with her.
And that was an idea
sweet.
that came on later. Actually, that wasn't.
Really?
Yeah, the idea was always that they were. You know, the first movie starts off with the sex talk, right? It's the couple that's in
Right.
love and they're doing little sex games before the friends join on. So I wanted to do the opposite of that. So we started the movie with, you know, a couple in conflict, and only one of them actually speaking, which was I didn't know until we saw our first test audience that was even going to work, because it's such an odd way to start a movie.
Was South by Southwest your first test audience? Because I know it's screened there.
Oh no, we tested it.
Oh, you tested
we
before
did test
that.
screenings, like what you referred to them as. Yeah, we did those first. But South by Southwest was the first sort of, you know, that was our premiere. That was really the.
How much of
premiere.
it changed from those?
It
early
changed
test
quite a
screenings?
bit, and it's kind of talking about, you know, what you had asked about the structure. You know, it took until I was starting to edit with my just wizard of an editor, Andrew Westman, who I will tell you a lot more about because he's just the genius of this movie, that I realized this is actually an animated film. You know, and I worked closely with Nelson Greaves, who wrote the first one and co-produced the first one too. And they were all trying to drill it into my heads, and I didn't really get there until we had it filmed in the 8 days that we had to film, and we were starting to edit. I'm like, this is an animated film. That's what this is. And the awesome thing about it was that it was an entirely mutable process. I mean, we came up with sequences just in the room going, oh, what if there was a sequence where this happened? And we realized we could create it because that sequence might not have anyone on camera except Matthias using the computer. So post was incredible because we got to just try a whole bunch of things. Someone came up with the idea of the app later on, and we did like one day with Colin, and we rebuilt that. It was an experience where the ultimate version of the movie is very much like the original script, but the stuff that was added came through post.
Wow!
I mean, it was quite an education to go through this. I mean, we filmed in the first week of October 2016.
Oh man!
So it's been it's been a pretty long process.
Well, it's interesting too because I just love the way it opens because it's your POV. I mean, you are the protagonist, really. I mean, like that. It's and then the fact that it like, oh, this is playing out in real time. There's going to be no 2 days later or rebooting the computer and we don't know how much time has elapsed. Like this is all playing out in real time. It's in a sense it's rope with a computer.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we talked about rope too. Yeah, it's funny.
I mean, like in that sense, but like. Before, I don't know how much spoiler territory I want to get into, but what I really feel is that we live at a time where social media is horror. I mean, social media has, you know, for myself personally, affected relationships, affected jobs, affected a lot of things. And this really is, I mean, this is the extreme version. Let's be honest, right? But it's a thing that people have genuine concerns about. I mean, there was just recently even the Twitter purge, right?
Yeah,
where
we were getting rid of bots.
Yeah, I think Film Threat we were like 104,000 and we lost like 2,000 followers on Twitter. So now we're down to 102,000.
I lost like 13 people.
Yeah. But I mean,
you're authentic.
But
nice.
it's weird that we live in a day where your social currency is this fictitious version of you and or entities on the internet, and how much value that's in stock that's given. But I mean, the way that this plays out, there are there obviously there are real stakes because bad things happen. I mean, I'm not ruining anything that's not in the trailer. I mean, there are things in the trailer that suggest trouble is afoot. I did not see it going to the extreme places that it did. And that it wasn't just the characters were tested, the morality was tested. Your own, like, you know, I mean, that's the thing with any horror film is you're looking like, well, how would I respond in this situation if there were a zombie apocalypse or I was confronted with this dilemma? And this deals with that perfectly. What I'm trying to say is I think this is going to resonate in ways that you may not have foreseen because of the times, you know, different from maybe when you originally conceived it.
That's great to hear. Yeah. I mean, I think you'll see this when you see the original movie that one of the great strengths of that film was that it was able to within the sort of the confines of a just kind of wildly entertaining bloodbath of a movie, and without being didactic at all, just really kind of have razor sharp teeth in the way that it talked about how social media has changed the way that particularly teenagers relate to each other. And when you look at the rise of depression, when you look at the rise of suicidality and sociopathy among younger people, and how, I mean, I just read a statistic and it was a study that kind of shocked everybody. They were trying to figure out exactly what the metrics are for teenage social media use, how much time they spend staring at their phone, what it is that they're doing. And they realize that most of what they're doing is waiting for people to respond to things that they've put out there, and sort of make sure that people are liking them. That, you know, and they freak out when someone just doesn't like it, doesn't comment on it.
It's that weird craving for validation.
Yeah. And with young people who are still trying to figure out the world, who are still building a moral compass, and suddenly we all had this thing like just dropped on us like a psychological experiment we didn't sign up for. And suddenly we're all, I mean, I can't imagine like being a teenager and growing up in the world of social media. I'm off social media now. Like I can't imagine. I was only on it for a brief window. I'm considering
it. I bought Jaron Lanier's book, The 10 Arguments for Deleting Your Social Media Accounts.
Yeah.
I'm reading it now, and it's frightening because it really is like when you look at like the greatest minds in Silicon Valley, they created a monster is what they did. And now that it's affecting so many aspects of our world, it's just crazy. And also, it's weird. Throw out a movie recommendation that does actually tie in is the film 8th Grade by Bo Burnham.
Oh yeah, I haven't seen that yet, but
you've got to see
fantastic.
it. Bo, I think we're gonna have Bo on the podcast in a couple weeks, but but that film is all about like being at that stage of life and how social media it affects everything. I just encourage you. It's a great companion piece to your film. I know, completely different one. I mean, I wouldn't describe 8th Grade as coming of age. It's going to be thrown in that category just because of the age of the lead character, who's brilliant. This young girl, Elsie, her first role in a movie, honestly. But the Bo collected such a great cast, but it's a great companion to your film in the sense that it's the same arena. It's talking about all these dangers that we're dealing with and how it affects so much decision making and warped decision making in a lot of ways. So
well, and that's something I wanted to continue because it was what really struck me. Besides the unique narrative form established by the first movie, was that you talked about it for hours afterwards because it was really exploring something in such a subtle way. I mean, nobody gave any lectures or speeches about it, but it was right there, and it was right in the hot spot where people were starting to figure out what cyberbullying was about and why you have teenagers like hanging themselves, you know, because of being bullied and harassed online. You know, it's awful. So it was important that this movie kind of was different, but also had something else to explore within that same sort of venue.
Yeah, I just remember when we all left the theater, Anthony, I, and Dante, we were first of all freaked the fuck out, thinking that like, because I think the horror films that I think really affect the most effective are ones where you're like, yeah, this could happen.
Absolutely.
Like, there are no vampires, right? Or there are. I mean, maybe there are monsters. Maybe there are monsters. I have this whole argument that in Quentin Tarantino movies are all monster movies, but the monsters are humans.
Yeah,
that's every Tarantino movie is a monster movie. If you seriously look at, they're all monster movies with people as the real world monsters, which is why I think they're so affecting. But in this could there's not a fantasy element in this film. These are all things that, you know, you mentioned it earlier. These are things we've read about that actually happened. These are things that have happened to people.
Yep.
In it. I mean, it was almost like you plucked from certain headlines or things that have been, you know, where the story is buried. But these are all things where we've heard those types of tales. But the connective tissue, these characters that are all, you know, again, I don't want to get into spoiler territory because hopefully if I mean, I would like to get into talking about social media in general. You mentioned that you're just not on it anymore. What led to that decision?
I was on
You
it
can't
for-
promote your movie now on social media.
Yeah, I know.
can't tag you when we put out this podcast. How are you going to tell people? Can you share on Facebook? Are you still on Facebook? Please.
No, I'm not on Facebook.
Because I think I said, I went to look for you on Facebook and I realized like, oh, we're not Facebook friends. You're just not. I couldn't find you.
Yeah.
I just searched my email and found you. But
That's the hardest part about leaving social media, actually, is that you lost. There were people I lost touch with.
Tell me now, as someone who's done this and talking to me, who's considering it, just for a number of reasons. How does it feel? Do you feel like you won something? Because I think the one thing I do know, I've way cut down on my social media use. I'm not as reactive to things right off the bat, and I just know that like the sense of satisfaction is just not. That I get from it is it just doesn't exist. I have a better time sitting at dinner talking to friends like we did when we saw the movie and talked about your movie for 2 hours over pictures of beer.
That's so great to hear, by the way.
But yeah, so what?
Let me keep saying thank you for that.
So what led to that decision?
I mean, it's funny. It doesn't. I mean, there's no victory to it. If anything, like sometimes you
made a
there's-
choice.
Yeah, and there's a loss of it because social media, you know, like it or not, is how we just deal now. It's how we relate. It's how people keep in touch, and it's and I found it very insulating, and I found that I actually drifted much further apart from people because then suddenly you had a reason not to necessarily get together with Thursday because you're like, oh, I'm following, you know, I'm seeing what he's up to, and oh yeah, he went to the beach, and that's cool, and you know, you kind of had the illusion of being more connected. And I think that, you know, it's the opposite is probably true. I mean, this is all my vantage point, though. I mean, there are people who are much more adept at social media. There are people who stay ultra connected, and it really fulfills their lives. So, you know, speaking in generalizations is always dangerous. But for me, you know, I just never liked the psychological effect that it had on me. I mean, I could feel the transition. I could feel the way that I was reacting to things. I mean, I kind of, it was after The Grudge came out that I did a Q&A on Sarah Michelle Gellar's website, and the people who ran that website said, well, there's more questions. Can you do like a regular forum? And then they said, why don't we build a website for you? And why don't we get you started on Facebook and all this stuff? And I don't know. Like, I tried it for a while, and I felt this, and I think maybe a lot of people feel this and maybe are reluctant to admit it. I started to feel this pressure to put out an appearance. I started to say, like, God, I haven't posted anything. I need to, like, I need to remind people that, like, I don't know, I do interesting stuff. And then it's like, well, why though? Like, why do I suddenly feel like I need to sell a vision of my life, and how do I curate my life? How does that work? And going down that road just felt like a narcissistic black hole. To suddenly start analyzing the metrics of my life and how I need to sell it or transmit it somehow to other people. You know, I never did Twitter, never, because from the beginning I was horrified of like, why would I want to just, I would never walk into a room and just shout something out like, here's what's in my head right now. What do you think? You know, like, we don't operate socially politely like that, and Facebook has really changed the way that we operate now in the real world. And I think it's part of the reason that we are so fragmented, more so than ever before. I think is directly in line with these things that were ostensibly supposed to bring us back together, because now we are very quick to just say, I'm going to talk about my sex, my politics, my religion, and everything else. Hi, nice to meet you.
Right.
You know, it's like everything that was kind of like polite conversation, impolite conversation that you shared with people you were really close to, you know, dialectics and debates that you had under the right circumstances. We now just like walk into a room and just freely label ourselves. And the people who have monetized the shit out of this are delighted. Meanwhile, it feels like our society is falling the fuck apart.
Yeah.
Because we're just we don't have any interest in it, and I don't know. And on top of that is just the whole illusion question. Like if you do all the social media, there are people who it's like, yes, this is me, this is how I communicate. I'm very authentic. So again, I'm speaking very generally. But it feels like, for a lot of people, the psychological weight of somehow keeping up with the Joneses, of making your status in the hierarchy of high school, in the hierarchy of your friendships, if that's your first point of contact, is someone Googling you or going on Facebook page, going on a Twitter page, the pressure to constantly curate that and constantly try to convince people of stuff about your life is just like, that's the most Sisyphusian task imaginable. So I've never missed for a day not being, again though, except for like, oh, why weren't you at the party last week? And it's like, oh, because you only did the invite over Facebook and I never found out about it.
I've missed some parties because people are like, oh, you didn't get the Facebook invite? It's like, no, I'm checking with Facebook like a couple times a week, but
that's why I like stuff like meetup.com. Like, I love Meetup. Because the interest that I have and the people that I'm friends with, like in Seattle, I'm into board gaming and I have these extensive board gaming groups. And
which board games are you into?
Oh boy, how much time do we need to do a totally separate podcast about this? I put a bunch of them in the movie. They're
I already know what the next horror movie is going to be about. It's going to be about a board game. That's also, it wouldn't be the first time, right? There's been horror. Wasn't that like Ouija? Game Night? Yeah, Game Night. Is that a horror movie though? It's more of a comedy.
It was a dark comedy.
It's definitely a dark comedy.
It was fun.
It was fun. I did not expect to enjoy that film, but I love Jason Bateman.
It was like an ARG,
Yeah. Yes.
Totally.
Yeah, but there has to be something, and I liberating about not being on social media, because you're right. There was a recent article about YouTubers, the ones that make a lot of money, that were just expressing being depressed over having to keep up their persona. There's a lot of, there's that pressure to constantly create, right? And I mean, you talked about it. I think that's the pathway for Unfriended, the third one. I mean, I really hope that you do consider doing a follow-up, because I feel that this format, I know that the first one a lot of people like, but it got some mixed reviews. I feel like this is gonna be, people are gonna love this more. I feel like there's got to be the third one in the trilogy. Is there already discussions?
Yeah, there's already discussions.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
please do it.
I think it's all, the nice thing about, and this is the nice thing about horror too, is that when the price point is low, then people are a lot less afraid. All of the kind of fear-based decisions that Hollywood is built on really evaporate. I mean, working with Jason, and we were in Blumhouse and Basilev's was unbelievable, because like I said, I thought the last phone call I was going to have with them was when I said I want to do a Hitchcockian thriller that's the exact opposite of the original movie. I thought that was like the last time we were going to talk about it. They created an environment where they're like, yeah, let's do, like, every time I said let's try something we haven't seen before, and they were like, sounds cool. You don't usually hear that. You say, usually you say let's try something we've never seen before, and you get like the look of like, can't we just do something that worked really well like last week? Like,
stick to the formula.
Yes, exactly.
Well, one thing we didn't talk about, which I wanted to make sure to ask you, is the transition from writer to director. You went into this knowing you were going to direct this as you were writing it.
Yeah.
Is that was part of the deal to entice you to be involved?
Yeah, I mean, I think even if it was just right, I probably would have done it for the sort of freshness of having to write something that had all those restrictions on it. Was a really fun experiment. But obviously, I wanted my first film to be something that was different. And this was something really different. So the directing was a huge part of it for me. Absolutely.
Did you find the writer part of yourself arguing with the director part of yourself? In the sense that you mentioned earlier that you changed the beginning of the film that had a dramatic... I mean, it dramatically changes the dynamic between two characters in a way that I think is great, but also derailing... I don't know. I just think it's awesome.
Well, what was fun about it was that it was approached like a play. So kind of writing and directing it as a play, and then taking it as a workshop experience and saying this is going to be very mutable while we're filming it, because we have actors that are really going to be able to experiment and are going to be able to discover things. There's wonderful improv moments all throughout the film that became
it
totally
seemed, to me, very strictly. I mean, like, it didn't seem like they were acting from a script, but it seemed pretty beat for beat scripted. But there are little improv moments that
yeah. Well, when you film in this way, when you have 3-hour cards and you're shooting on GoPros connected to laptops,
right,
you have enormous flexibility, and it was fun realizing that these actors were going to make me look good, because I was just watching. They would just start self-directing. They would go back, and one of them would just throw something out, and the other actors would gang up on it, and they were taking it like it was an improv. They helped me refine their characters. They built backstories with each other. And that way, then when we were in front of cameras, they could just go. Like they would just go. I mean, the very last thing that we did, the second to last thing that we did, the very last thing we did was we did an 1.5-hour Cards Against Humanity session that we just recorded. Right before that, the second last thing, the penultimate thing that we did was I said, let's just try going through the whole movie. Let's just do beginning to end. Let's because they had done so much so quickly that we got to that last day, and it was all like, this part I think could use some juice. Let's refine this part. I mean, again, we were moving so quickly. We had 4 days to do all the dialogue. But we did that. We said, let's just try to start from the beginning, but no script. Like, you guys kind of know the beats, you know the rhythms. Let's just do it like as improv as possible. And all those elements are threaded throughout,
Oh my God.
And it just adds to that kind of authenticity.
Your editor must have been,
oh my God, Andrew Westman. So Westman,
you gotta give some credit to the editor.
Andrew needs so much credit. I've been trying to get him to do a podcast with me because he's just a genius. And I mean, he co-edited the first movie. So it was really great, and working with Nelson too, it was really helpful having people that have done this before because they really understood the nuances of what made this format different. But Andrew and I have been in a room together for, at least 90% of every day beginning mid-October 2016. He edited the film, he animated the film, he did a lot of the visual effects for the film. The first cut was 2 hours and 59 minutes long.
Jeez.
And he was the one who said, okay, now we're going to start to have these things happen at the same time. And would do stuff. And I'm like, oh, fuck, that's right. This is how we use computers. We don't do one thing at a time. So my script was very linear. And then with all the improv we did, it just grew and grew and grew and grew. And we created conflicts as we went. And then we realized we needed to compress stuff. And for a while, I was like, I don't know if people can follow this. But I would watch it and say, I get it. And we had the mouse. The mouse became the editorial tool. So like you said, there's no cutting. And that's what editing is. Editing, you tend to jump to eye lines so you can kind of direct where people are looking. We didn't have that ability. But then we realized the mouse is an emotive tool. The mouse is a directional tool. Mouse can show you hesitation. So you can get inside Matthias. Matthias doesn't have to speak, and you can watch the way he's typing. You can watch the way the mouse is moving, and you get it. You get what he's feeling. So collapsing all those things to happen simultaneously, honestly, it wasn't until the first test screening. I mean, I think I walked into that screening going, none of this is going to work. Everyone's going to be bored. They're not going to be able to keep up. They're going to hate it. And after the laughter of the opening with the password,
that's such a great opening.
It was really fun. That was enough in the beginning.
Awesome.
That was that was fun. Yeah,
so good.
But what I liked about it too was it also, it's funny, but it tells you something very clearly. It tells you right away before you've seen anyone on screen that whoever's using this computer, which is you, right? It doesn't belong to them, and it does it without anything else. And again, like that's I think what was really just educational for me was to discover. And this is where Andrew's brilliance really came in too, because he had done it before, was finding ways to use the narrative form in ways that it simply can't be done in any other way cinematically. That there are things that happen on a computer screen because of the way that we use computers and our familiarity with them that give you narrative avenues that don't exist in contemporary storytelling.
Well, it's interesting because here we all feel some kind of emotion when you're in a heated text exchange, whether it's positive or negative, with someone, and you see the little graphic that tells you that person is typing, and then maybe the graphic goes away, then maybe the graphic comes back, then maybe the graphic goes away. If we get emotion over that, I mean that just shows you have these tools now to tell for this kind of storytelling to really be something. I mean,
absolutely,
it works so well. And I didn't even think about that. In this traditional script format, which I've had arguments with friends of mine. When I say arguments, I'm not arguing with them. They're arguing with me that traditional script writing is not really there's got to be a different way of doing it. You wrote it in a linear sense, but those things can all be happening simultaneously. And it's interesting that it went from I don't know what the final running time is.
93 minutes all in, I think.
It just feels. I feel like the perfect running time is a movie that doesn't feel long. That's just the perfect, and this did not feel long. It felt
No.
Yeah,
There was a lot of experimenting to get this runtime because there was so much cheese. I mean, there were whole sections of movie that don't exist, and there's some killer scenes.
Well,
that
it'll
for
be
some
on
of
the
actors
DVD.
That,
It'll be on the
I hope
DVD.
so. Well,
If
one
there's
one version of the Blu-ray is that there's a 90-minute completely separate film called Friended. That's just people online playing Settlers of Catan, going through some relationship drama, having
Okay,
some laughs.
that's hilarious. Is that culled from that footage or for rehearsal stuff?
We could use nothing that's in the final film. We have, I mean, the first cut of the movie was almost 3 hours long. And
It's
even
like that
with the
Anchorman
collapsing-
thing where they made 2 different Anchorman movies. You got, oh my God. Well, see, now I have to get the Blu-ray of this.
They did that for both of the movies.
Did they?
Both of the.
I was
Oh,
trying to
wow.
sell them on. Do you remember the Mike Figgis movie Time Code?
Yes, I know. Yes, I'm
So we're the same.
well
era.
aware.
Do you remember when I think it was at the New Bev. He did one screening of it where he live mixed it.
Yeah,
So that
yeah.
you were hearing completely different exchanges. This is do you see this movie?
No.
It's a movie that
This was
has
at Sun.
horror-
This was well. Wasn't it
so good.
Sundance? Was it at Sundance? All I know is that we were on a panel together at Park City.
Oh, that's nice.
With the year that movie
Gonna be
came out,
interesting, dude.
that was so innovative.
Oh my gosh!
for
So
its time.
it was a 4-quadrant screen, and the whole movie was in real time. But what would happen is you would hear the audio differently, so you were kind of following what was happening in those 4 different quadrants by the audio, and he live remixed it, so you could, and so if you went, you would only see this version of the movie once because he was doing it live. Yeah, what a cool idea! And I always thought that'd be fun to sort of do a screening of the movie where we just recut it. So it was a very similar movie, but it was completely alt at the same time. And then had these missing sequences. Like there's a sequence where, without giving a spoiler away, there was a whole sequence where when they realized that they had this money, they said, what do we do with this money? And it became, because one of the things I wanted to do was, since the first movie, which you'll see, and I don't want to blow it for you, is about realizing that they're not really friends. And Blumhouse always called it the Sunlight movie, where the deeper you got, you realize, just like social media, like it was all bullshit. Like they were horrible to each other, as it turned out. I wanted this movie to be the opposite. I wanted them to be tested and have their friendships actually withstand some heat. So a lot of the stuff that was cut was this kind of relationship drama of what would they choose to do with this, and having people watch and observe what they were going to do. And but for the sake of runtime, we had to lose a lot of that sort of juicy, dramatic material. So who knows? Maybe someday that'll come out. But a movie like this is tough because you're already placing a huge demand. I mean, you're saying to people who, by and large, will spend all day in front of a computer, say, "Cool. So now, when you're off work and you can get away from that computer and get out of your desk, come buy a ticket and sit in front of a huge computer screen."
Welcome back.
Yeah, it's a lot to ask.
But
So
that's why it's so relatable. That's why it's so relatable. And I'm glad. I mean, I don't know what ages your kids are, but mine are at the age where they can. I mean, they're in their 20s, so but they don't care about social media. It's not where they seek validation. They're on it begrudgingly because that's the way to stay connected to family photos. But thankfully, both of my kids they use social media rarely.
Interesting.
So, but your kids are not at that age, or at the age where
my
they
daughter's
might-
much younger. My son's getting there though. He's like preteen.
Yeah, that's a whole thing. Like, are they on Snapchat? Are they? It's a whole different.
He's
like,
not on anything yet. He's on Roblox and Minecraft and
keep him
Destiny
in Minecraft.
2, and
Yeah.
he's a gamer.
Oh, that's good.
But we live like 300 steps to Microsoft's main campus, so most of his friends are mega wired, and a lot of his friends are already on social media. A lot of his friends already have cell phones and everything that that's not going to let him have, and it's tough as a parent to see your kid moving into the orbit of something that you find kind of terrifying, and trying to figure out how to not ostracize them, but also not let them, not say, no, it's actually not okay to even step into the pool. The pool's not safe.
Yeah.
You can't even stick your toe into it. It's just simply not, for a variety of reasons.
I mean, just because I keep up with this stuff, some have suggested that there should be an age limit on social media, just like they're talking about raising the age limit for certain types of weapons that you can purchase, which
but they're doing
seems
the opposite
logical.
now. Like Facebook, isn't Facebook introducing like kids messenger or something?
Oh, I had not heard that.
I think they're actually carving out. Well, they realize that the sooner they get their claws in,
Right. Well, because people are leaving Facebook. It's just become a less than pleasurable experience. I feel like when I'm on Facebook, it's kind of like when you open the refrigerator late at night and you're like, I don't know what I want. Wait, why is the refrigerator still open? It's been 5 minutes. what am I doing? So Facebook is, you go to it out of, at least for me, it's a habit, or I feel like it's something I have to do rather than something that is a pleasurable experience.
Well, it's the cell phones are like that too. I
Yeah,
mean,
true.
You should just do the cell
Our
phone
black mirrors.
Do the cell phone experiment. You
Right.
know, leave it somewhere and see how long you can not check it. And while you're checking it, if it needs you, it'll make a sound, right?
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
not true, because what it is I need to see what has happened on all my social networks in the last 15 seconds that I've been not looking at the screen. It's when you really step back and you look at it and you say, how is this different from any other addiction that normally frightens people? And are we only not frightened because people are making a lot of money off of it?
Yeah.
And they've done it. They've crafted it so cleverly that people don't want to see the psychological fallout of being tethered to these things. And
Well,
again, like I say this as a technophile.
Right.
You know, I love technology, and this stuff just, I don't want to have anything to do with it.
Yeah, I really think because it's become a pathway to quick stardom, and that's why people keep it going. There was that case of that girl who she ended up like $20,000 in debt because she put everything into her Instagram, and it was all about, she went on these lavish trips, hired photographers, and I mean it was all fake, right? She built a false version of her life via Instagram and ended up being 20 grand in debt just to build up that following. That was
it's
so
this weird
important.
human. It's our capacity for self-flagellation of some measure that we're aware of it, but we do it anyway. It's kind of like, you know, I remember like my favorite movies growing up were like the paranoia movies of the early 70s, like Parallax View and The Conversation. You know, that great scene at the end, playing the saxophone in the apartment that's been torn apart because they can't find the bug. Like people were just so paranoid in the era of Richard Nixon, right? Of you know, government surveillance. And now we know more than ever before. We are fully aware of what they're doing, and we are filling our homes with Alexas and Google Dots. And you know what I mean? It's like we're like, oh, this is really awful what they're doing. Hey Alexa, what time is the thing later? You know, and it's just like, seriously,
Right?
You know, and I that capacity I just find kind of breathtaking, and it just feels like we're going, yes, this is really really bad, and we're swimming deeper. Does that make sense? Because it doesn't make sense to me, and
Yeah.
I think we need a big wake up, and it feels like we keep getting pretty strong wake ups, and we're not waking up yet.
Well, I mean, it's like that movie Monsters on is it Monsters on Maple Street, the old Twilight Zone,
Oh, yeah,
where basically all the power and communication goes out and how everyone reacts. I almost think that you could do a modern update of that with just an EMP over Los Angeles, knocking out all electronic devices. How would people know anything, right? All electronic devices, everything out. Facebook doesn't exist. All that time you spent building that following doesn't exist. Your bank currency, everything electronic. Everything's electronic now. I really think that we're at risk, right?
I think Jon Favreau produced a TV show that was kind of based around that idea.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
it was called Revolution or something.
yeah. I mean, I
Yeah, he directed the pilot. Yeah, I remember that.
it's but that old Twilight Zone, I mean, that holds true. Like, where do people's minds go when this thing that they've depended upon, this phony, this fake thing that we all agree is like, well, this has value. Well, yes, it has value because we all agree that it does, right? When it goes away, how does that affect everyone?
But it's also just it's so bewildering that all the opportunity that's been afforded to us via the internet is just being squandered. You know, like one of the great things about it is to say, well, instead of really limited media sources, for example, you can now research the hell out of anything that you want.
Right.
So anytime you hear anyone say X, you can say, I'm going to check the shit out of X, you know, and you can look up pro arguments for X. You can look up con arguments for X. You can look up very neutral arguments for X. You can look at people who put X on their wall and pray to it every day. You can look at people who say, I won't go near X. And then you figure out where you land. You get your diversity of opinion, and then you figure out where you're oriented as you know, in reference to X. And nobody does that. It's like more and more now, we just go, yeah, that headline, I'm going to blast that out. And everyone goes, yeah. And it's like, we have this incredible opportunity, and we're self-choosing. I mean, it's not like people are doing this to us. We've just decided that we want to kind of narrow ourselves even further. It doesn't take much to Google something, you know?
Right.
Google, what is a con opinion on this matter or this person?
Well, but I think that people doing that are simply looking for validation of something that they already think. It's really just like, give me the sources that tell me that what I'm already predisposed to think is the...
It's like a preference bias. Is that what it's called?
Absolutely.
Yeah, they just look for a lot of voices that reinforce their own opinion.
Exactly.
Which doesn't make any sense. Because, like, it's... if you have a conviction, the only way to make sure that conviction is valid in any capacity is to constantly challenge it.
Oh, yeah.
Because there's nothing can go wrong. It means you're always open. You're always open to someone telling you something you haven't heard and going, okay, maybe I need to change this conviction. Or you just keep hearing a lot of nonsense and you're like, yeah, this conviction still holds water. It amazes me that, again, in this world where you can open yourself up to a flood of data, we take our convictions and then we hold our breath and close our ears and eyes. And we're like, nope, this is what I believe. This is what I believe. This has to be right. And
stay in that
like,
bubble.
Jesus, man. Like, the world has become so... again, that's why I'm instinctively a technophile, is because I love what the internet has afforded as a tool to... the world has never been more connected. We see things that are going on in countries that before the internet people would never even hear about in their entire lives.
Right. And
people can band together and raise money and send it somewhere to... Like, people can enact change at a local level in a way that has never been paralleled throughout human history. And it seems like the bulk of what we're actually doing is just becoming more balkanized. We're becoming more entrenched in our own views, and we're hating each other more instead of saying we can now, sunlight, I think, is the cure to everything. Like, racists are generally people who were taught something and never had anything to convince them otherwise. And a racist leaves their hometown, goes to a city, probably not going to be racist for much longer, like, probably not. All of that bullshit that they're fed just kind of evaporates with exposure, and it's like, well, the internet is like the brightest beacon. You can get exposed to anything you want. Just ask, man. There it is. Gay rights in this country moved forward rapidly, primarily because of media, media exposure, and people who grew up hearing things about people who were gay, and then watching TV shows and going, they kind of look awesome. What I don't know what this person said about that. I think sunlight is the key to everything. It's the key to everything that we want humans to be.
Well,
and
do people want to see the sunlight version? Do they want to see Friended? Do they want to see the, you know what I mean?
Well, I'm not talking about my movie.
I was going to say, I almost think that, like, I think like, I love when there's those kind of stories, but there's a dark side. It's sort of the balance. Yeah.
Human nature is such. Just the bare fact that we have been afforded the ability now to see anything we want and expose ourselves without anybody's permission, except maybe your internet service provider, to visually clue in whatever you want to be exposed to, and we ourselves just choose to say nope, I actually don't want that. That says a lot about kind of human DNA, and it's alarming. It's very alarming. So they go hand in hand, and but I guess it's human history, right? To have these incredible breakthroughs that can afford wonderful transformations of positivity and culture, and we always find a way to turn it into a bomb or something, right?
Yeah, we always fuck it up.
That's the theme of every Twilight Zone episode.
Basically.
And I think Black Mirror more recently. But Stephen, thank you for talking with us about Unfriended Dark Web. Opens Friday, July 20th. Highly recommend you see it in the theater.
Yeah.
Almost definitely. Absolutely see this movie in the theater with an audience, a good horror audience, packed on a Friday or Saturday night. And I would normally, this is the part of the show where we'd say, and where can we follow you on social media? And Steven Susko, we cannot follow you anywhere. On the Films Rep podcast. And people, you are on IMDb. You are on IMDb. That's where they keep track.
Sure.
That's where they keep track of you. But thank you so much for doing the show. It's been a pleasure and an honor to talk to you today, and so great to talk to someone that's been a friend for a number of years who's made a movie I fucking love.
That's awesome.
So thank you,
dude. The pleasure's mine. I'm really glad you liked it. It's nice. It's nice talking to you about it.
Cool. And let's get out of here.